and two plainclothes detectives grabs me and throws me up against the wall, and was in the process of putting cuffs on me. Well, I was totally surprised. I was so confused. I said, "What are you doing? Who are you?" And they said, "Well, we're detectives from the Dallas Police Department, and we're arresting you." I said, "Arresting me? Arrest me for what?" I said, "I haven't done anything."
You're listening to Quorum Radio.
So Mr. Thule and Marion Baker, they enter the building, and they end up on the second floor. We have two lunchrooms there in that building at that time. We had one on the first floor called the Domino Room, where most of the guys ate their lunch. I never did eat lunch in there. I did one time. It was too noisy. So I preferred to eat myself down in the basement where it was cool. And I'd usually have a book I'd like to look at while I was eating my lunch. Sure. But getting back to, they get up on the second floor, and there's a lunchroom there. And Marion Baker and Mr. Trudy, they encounter Lee Oswald. There he was standing there in front of the Coke machine getting a soda. And over on one of the tables was a partly eaten cheese sandwich and an apple. And so,
oh, really?
Yes.
By the way, quick question. So that was in the second floor lunchroom. So they find Lee Harvey Oswald, I guess, drinking a Coke or buying a Coke?
Well, he was purchasing a soda there at the Coke machine. We had a Coke machine.
Was there anybody else in there besides Lee, the police officer, and Roy Truly?
That was only three out here. They encountered Lee there at the soda machine getting a soda. Yeah. And so Marion Baker looks at Mr. Truly. He says, "Do you know him?" And Mr. Truly looked at him. He said, "Yes, he works there." Well, and then they go on with their search, Mr. Truly and Marion Baker.
So do they think that cheese sandwich was Lee Harvey Oswald's or what? Or it's just not?
That I don't know. I've been told that there was a partly eaten cheese sandwich there on the table and a partly eaten apple. And so that would make one think, was Lee actually there eating his lunch? Because there's no one to verify that. And the thing is, if you stop and think about the area up on the sixth floor, knowing the building like I know it very well, he would have to come diagonally across the building, come down the stairs to the lunchroom, and a little over a minute. And it just doesn't seem possible. Because no one heard anybody coming down the stairs and everything, because everybody wasn't out watching the parade. Some people were still in the building working.
Yeah. Some of the people were watching from the building, though, right?
Yeah, it is true.
So just one thing I want to ask you before I forget, Buell. When you were back in the parking lot at the beginning of the workday, and Lee was walking on ahead of you, did he have that package positioned in such a way that it was like he was obscuring it or hiding it or what?
No, that never occurred to me there. He just he carried it. One end of the package was in the palm of his right hand, and the other end of it was, up under his armpit on his right side of his body. I didn't think anything about it.
Sure.
But
now there's great. And so let me ask you a question. There's also, this is going to get back to the scene of the assassination and the moment of the assassination or just after. In your book, did you reveal that you saw him after the shooting?
Yes, I do.
Wow, tell us about that.
Well,
please.
I was I was, I moved off the steps and I started to go down to try to find Mr. Shelley and Billy, and I realized it was so many people and it's such a chaos. I said, I will never find him. So I turned around and walked back toward the front steps of the school book depository, but walked on to the corner there just a few feet further, and there was some couple of people standing there, and so we were just talking, and they were trying to figure out what had happened and what was going on, and then I turned to my left, and here comes, I see Lee come off the back loading dock, and he's walking down beside the Texas School Book Depository building on the sidewalk coming toward me. Well,
really?
I thought he would probably, when I saw him walking toward me, I thought maybe he was going over to one of the sandwich shops to get him a sandwich, so I didn't think anything about it. But he didn't come right up directly to me there where you would cross the street. He stopped and went diagonally over and got into the walk path and crossed Houston Street. And then when he got across the street, then he crossed Elm Street. And about halfway across.
So you saw all this, right?
Yes, I saw this, yes. And so...
wow. So how was he walking? Quickly? Casually?
No.
In a leisurely way?
Just normal, nothing.
Yeah.
He didn't seem to be in a hurry or anything. And about halfway across Elm Street, one of the people that was standing there said something to me, and I turned to see who was talking to me. And when I turned back, then I lost him in the crowd.
Right. And so now but the story, the plot thickens in your book because you saw something else, right? You mentioned, and I think this is, I don't know if this is the first time in this book that it's come out from you, but you said there was a man with a rifle that you saw, right? Right? Did you see somebody with a weapon down there, or?
Yes, I did. Now the thing is about this, what the reader has to, or the person listening has to understand. This was such an unusual event that had happened there just shortly. Well, I had gone down toward the triple underpass there on this little street running from the building to try to find Mr. Shelley and Billy. And here's the thing.
Yeah.
What happened there, I saw a man with a rifle. And when I was walking along and I wasn't paying any attention. I was just looking around, and then I zoned on this man with a rifle. Well, when I saw him, oh gosh, I was so excited. I said, oh my gosh.
Was that before the assassination or just after?
After. And
like seconds, 15, 20 seconds?
No. I don't know exactly how long. But anyway, the reader and the person listening to this interview have to realize that I was so frightened that I did see this, but if you'd have asked me that a couple of minutes later, I would deny that I'd seen anything because I was so frightened. It was just locked in my memory. And
sure.
But the man, he comes up. He wasn't in a hurry. He was very well dressed. He wasn't a policeman or a detective. The way he was dressed, he seemed to be in his own little world. He wasn't concerned, and I told him when I looked and saw him, I said, I haven't seen anything, and I was so scared.
Yeah.
And I know,
sure,
just locked in my memory, and for someone reading the book or listening to this interview, I have been told that sometimes when people see something that is so frightening to them that it's locked in their memory but they don't know. They don't remember. They. If you'd asked them a few minutes later or sometime later, they would deny they'd seen anything because it was
Sure.
I guess the position or what was going on at that time is just locked in your memory, and
Sure.
and I didn't remember this to some years later. And
let me ask you. Sure. Let me go ahead, Buell.
And the man was very well dressed. I remember he had a pair of light beige brown slacks on. He had a tweed brown sport coat, and he had a fedora on. He was very well dressed and very well groomed. And when I saw him and I stopped, well, I was right by a car. They had angle parking back there on that little side street, that Elm Street extension. Well, when I stopped and I seen him coming toward me, I just stopped. I just froze. And he looked at me, we made eye contact. I said, I haven't seen anything.
Wait, so he looked at you? He looked directly at you, you said?
Oh, absolutely.
How far away were you from that man?
Oh, maybe probably 8 feet.
Wow.
And you can understand something like tragedy like it happened, how I was so frightened. And so he opens the trunk and he puts the rifle in the trunk of the car. And he shuts the trunk. And the car he was driving, it wasn't a police car or anything. A lot of times they use old cars or plain Jane type cars.
Sure.
And so he puts a rifle in the trunk and closes the door, and I turn around and I start walking back toward the steps leading into the Texas School Book Depository. I was so scared and I was so frightened. I was
By the
so
way, did he have
crazy.
anything in the trunk? Did you see anything in his trunk besides?
Yes. Yes, he had appeared to me to be a pump shotgun.
Wow.
So
amazing.
I turn around.
So let me ask you a question. Oh, go ahead.
I turn around and I'm walking back toward the steps leading into the entrance of the Texas School Book Depository. I was so scared. I was so afraid. Something was going to happen to me. I was so afraid that he.
And by the way, did any other people? Sure. So Buell, did any other people with you? Because there are a lot of people over there. Did anybody else see him?
No. Not that I know of, because no one has never reported it.
Sure. All right. So let me ask you a question here. Boy, it's pretty shocking. Just wondering, at any time, you see something like that, it's natural for people to reach out to close friends or family. Did you call your home in Irving just after this happened?
No.
To talk to your mom or your sister?
No. I didn't call anyone.
So you didn't. And I understand your stepfather had a heart attack and he was in the hospital. Is that right?
That is correct. They were in Irving.
Wow.
Yes.
So what happened right after that? You saw this man. He gets into a car. I guess you saw him drive away?
Well, like I said, I turned my back, and he closes the trunk, and I see him close the trunk, and I turn my back, and I'm walking toward the entrance to the Texas School Book Depository. I hear the car start, and he drives away. And you can only go one way. You have to come back toward because there's a one way there. So I walk back toward the steps of the Texas School Book Depository, and I don't go up the steps. I go to the corner, and that's where the two or three people were standing there, and I was talking and listening to them talk. And then that's when I turn to my left and I see Lee Oswald walking down beside the building.
Wow. So, sure. The question I want to ask you just while we're talking about cars, tell us about the car you had that you drove to work that day with Lee Oswald. What kind of car did you drive at that time?
I drove a black 4-door 1954 Chevy Bel Air.
Okay, great. Okay, wow. Beautiful car. All right. So tell us about, you see Lee Oswald walking down Elm Street, right? You see.
Well, I see him walking down beside the building there on Houston Street. The building, Texas School Books, is at Houston and Elm Street. Right. So he's walking along beside the building. Yeah, he's walking down Houston Street toward me there on the corner. And that's when I told you earlier that he didn't come up to where I am to cross the street. He crosses diagonally over and gets into the path marked off that you walk in. And he crosses Houston, and then he gets there, and then he turns to his right and crosses Elm Street. And halfway across Elm Street, I lose him in a crowd because someone asked me something, and I turned to see who's talking to me.
Right. Sure. That's normal. So let me ask you a question. So you have this incredible event unfold before your eyes and the eyes of your workmates. What happened after you saw Lee and you saw this man with the rifle? I guess everybody's standing around, stunned. Then what happened? I guess were police all over the place? Describe the scene within the first 5 minutes after that, after you had seen Lee and after you saw the man with the rifle get into the car. What else? Describe us the scene, please.
Well, after Lee is crossing Elm Street, and I turned to see who's talking to me, I turned back and I lose him, and I don't know where he had gone. So I turn around and I'll go back to the front steps, walk up the front steps, go into the building, and I realized that I hadn't eaten my lunch. So I go strictly down to the basement. I get my lunch. I'm sitting there eating my lunch, and I look up, and there's a policeman looking at me. And he asked me, he said, "Have you seen anybody down here?" I said, "No." I said, "I heard you could go down into the basement 2 ways." I said, "I heard the door over there open, but I didn't see anybody." I guess it was him because I wasn't looking for anybody. And so I tell him how to get back up to the first floor quicker than the route he'd gotten down into the basement with. And so I finished eating my lunch, and I realized it was really quiet. And I said, "I better go see what's going on." So I'll go upstairs, and there's a lot of people on the first floor begin to congregate there. And so I asked a couple people, "What's going on?" I said, "They began to assemble there on the first floor." People from worked up on other floors in the depository there. So I asked, "What's going on?" And so they said, "We're getting ready to have a roll call." And we did. We had a roll call. And after the roll call, Mr. Truly announced that due to what had happened that day, that we would not be working anymore that afternoon, but we would report back to work on Monday morning to resume normal activities. And so after that,
about what time, by the way, Buell? Excuse me, sir. About what time did he make that statement? Do you remember?
Oh, that roll call was probably around 1:00.
Wow. Okay.
And so people left, started going their ways where they were going. So I walked down to the parking lot, get in my car, and I start home to Irving. And I realized it was much earlier in the afternoon than normal, so I said, "Well, I'll go by and check on my stepfather for my mother. And I did that. And while I was there,
excuse me. So you went over to the hospital, right?
Yes, I just stopped by the hospital. Nobody knew I was going there. And,
but they had already released you and all the other employees, right?
Say again, please.
They had already dismissed all the workers to go home.
Yes.
When you went.
They did that. They did that right after. They did that right after the roll call.
Right. And by the way, when the roll call happened, were you there listening to it from the start?
Yes, I was there at the start of the roll call. Yes.
This is interesting. You know, were there very many people absent when they did the roll call, Buell?
Not anyone but Lee, as far as I know. So
you heard them mention Lee Harvey Oswald's name?
Well, they called out his name and no one answered. When they called out other people's names, they would answer. So after the roll call, they said, well, like I told you, that we weren't going to be doing any more work that day, but we would report back to work on Monday and resume normal activities. And so they said, you're free to leave and go home or go wherever you have to go.
Sure. And so then, but just to verify that, Buell, 1 second. So then the only person that wasn't present when they called the name was Lee Oswald, right?
As far as I know, that's correct.
Wow. Interesting. So then, okay. So then you drive off to the hospital. The traffic must have been totally disrupted, slow. What was the traffic like on the way to the hospital?
That is normal. You know, the thing is, you have to realize that the population of Dallas back in 1960 was nothing like what it is today. And so I got out to the hospital and I went in and I checked at the desk there and made sure which room to go to. And so I got to the room and I was there and the nurse was changing. They was giving my stepfather something to IV, and so the nurse was changing the amount of drops per minute, and so she says, you have a watch? She says, help me. She says, I've got to go to another room here, but I'll be right back. She says, I want to know how many drops you see dropping per minute. So I said, okay, and I was in the process of doing that, so the phone rings in the room, and I answered, and so the lady at the front desk said, you have a call, and I said, well, just patch it through to the room here, and I'll take the call. And she says, well, I'm new, and I don't know how to do that. So she says, can you come to the front desk? I said, yes. I said, I'll be there shortly. So I hang up the phone. I tell my stepfather, I said, I'll be right back. Well, I opened the door to his room, and two plainclothes detectives grabs me and throws me up against the wall and was in the process of putting cuffs on me. Well, I was totally surprised. I was so confused. I said, what are you doing? Who are you? And they said, well, we're detectives from the Dallas Police Department, and we're arresting you. I said, arresting me? Arrest me for what? I said, I haven't done anything. And so I told him, I said, please don't put the cuffs on me. And so I said, I'm not going anywhere. I said, we'll just go down to the police station and I'll answer the questions that you want me to answer. And I said, and then we'll get this cleared up very shortly and I'll be on my way. Well.
And by the way, this happened, sir. This happened just like within minutes of you arriving at your stepfather's bedside. They just appear out of nowhere, so you hadn't spoken to anybody in your family aside from your stepfather. Was anybody at his bedside besides you?
No, just myself.
You hadn't spoken to anybody. Excuse me, you hadn't spoken to anybody in your family at all since breakfast time, right?
That is correct.
Wow.
And
did they actually handcuff you, Buell?
Well, they were in the process of putting handcuffs on me, and I told them, I said, you don't need to do that. And I said, please don't put the handcuffs on me. I said, I haven't done anything wrong. I said, if you need to ask me some questions, I said, we'll go down to the police station and clear this up, and I'll be on my way in a short time. And so,
and what time was that about approximately? It was like maybe 2:00.
Probably somewhere in, I don't know exactly, probably somewhere in that area. So we leave the hospital and we go over to my sister's home, and they asked me, said, do you have any firearms? And I said, yes, I do. And they asked me what it was. I told them I had a British Enfield 303 rifle and a double barrel 16 gauge shotgun. It was an 1891 Stephen. And so I said, well, where do you keep that? And I showed them in my closet. And they said, do you have ammunition for this? I said, I do. And I showed them that. Well, they confiscate that. And then we go out and get in the car. There's nobody home at my sister's house at that time.
Right.
The children are at school. I don't know where my sister, I don't know where she was, and she and my mother were somewhere. And so we get into the car, and so they stopped by the Irving police station and said, we want to tell them what we're doing. So we went in this police station, and I thought that's where we'd be going, but they just talked to the sergeant and told him what they were doing and to keep him in the loop. And so we got back in the car and went to downtown Dallas, the Dallas Police Headquarters.
Wow.
And so we got there, and they told me there's going to be a lot of reporters and people in the hallway, said don't say anything. And the hallway was so crowded. So they take me to a room, and they begin to interrogate me. And this went on for probably a couple of hours. Same questions over and over and over.
What were the questions they asked you?
Well, I don't remember the exact questions, Bill, but to give you an example, they'd ask you a question, you'd give them an answer. Well, a few minutes later, they'd ask you that same question, but in a different, using different words, but the answer should be the same to the second time as it was the first. Well, this went on for a couple of hours, and so
wow.
They take a break and go out, and another two detectives come in, and they start on this again. And so
let me ask you a question, Buell. At that time, going through this gauntlet of interrogators, asking the same question different ways and all, what was your mental state at that time?
Well, at that time, I was just trying to do anything I could to let them know that I had nothing to do with what happened that day. And
did they ask you about Lee Oswald?
Yes, they asked me about Lee, but I didn't know that they'd already had Lee down the other end of the hall doing the same thing to him. But I did not know that. But anyway, so the second team comes in, they do the same thing. Well, and then they leave, and the first two guys that arrested me out in Irving, that interrogated me, Detective Rose and Detective Stovall, they come in and start over again, and they do the same thing. And so by the time their time's up, they look at one another and they think that they've learned everything that I know, and so they're happy with that. So then they turn in. Then they tell Captain Fritz that this kid's clean. You know, he's told us everything he knows, and he doesn't know anything. Well, Captain Will Fritz doesn't believe that, so he comes in with a signed statement and puts it down on the table in front of me and hands me a pen. He says, "Sign this." Well,
wow.
You know, I may be country and come from a long way in Deep East Texas. But I was always told you don't sign anything until you read it. Well, I started reading it, and it was what it was a confession that I was part of what happened earlier that day with the assassination of John Kennedy. And I said, I'm not signing it. This is ridiculous. Well, he's standing to my left.
Remember, pardon me, Buell, I want to just get a clarification here on that quote confession. How was it, like one paragraph long, 3 or 4 lines, 2 or 3 paragraphs to take up another page? How long was it?
It was just one page.
And so, like,
it was all typed. It was all typed and everything.
So were they alleging that you were accessory to the crime, or what exactly were they trying to allege about you?
Well, that's what they was trying to prove and get me to sign, that I was a part of that. And so when I told him, I said, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to sign this. Well, he was standing to my left. Well, he raises his hand, his right hand up to hit me, and I put my left arm up to block.
Did he have his hand in the form of a fist?
No, I don't think so. I didn't look that close. All I did was put my arm to block because I saw a hand coming up, and I figured he was going to hit me, so I put my arm up to block and blocked his arm, and I looked at him and I said, there's policeman right outside that door over there. But I said, before they get in there, I said, we're going to have a hell of a fight. And I said, I'm going to get some good licks in on you. But by then, I had become angry. When they tried to accuse me of something that I never would do in my wildest imagination, trying to accuse me of that, it really made me angry. And
do you remember any of the words, Buell? Any of the things they were alleging that they were trying to get you to confess to? Do you remember any of it?
No, not right off, but all it does, I'm just telling you that they wanted me to agree that I was accessory to the fact that what had happened and was part of it, and I'm not going to have any part of that because that's totally false. So he grabs the paper and the pen and stomps out of the room, and I never did see him ever again.
Wow. And so then what happened?
Well, then Detective Rose and Stovall came back in, and they started to question me again, and then they said, well, we're done here, and so they said they was going to take me home.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know it, but my sister had been brought down to the police station there in Dallas by our pastor at the church where we attended. The pastor's name was Campbell, Reverend Campbell.
Which church did you attend?
At that time I was attending a Baptist church there in Irving.
So then what happened? So you saw, I guess, Lenny Mae?
I didn't even know that Lenny was there, but so they get her, and so we go down to the garage down in the basement, get in the car, and we're heading out to Harvey. And so we get out to about around Inwood and Mockingbird off of Stemmons Freeway.
Yeah. And
they get a call to bring me back. And so they turn around and we go back to the police station. And when I got there and I got into the police station, then they do a mug shot, and they do a fingerprint, and they do a polygraph test. And I passed those, and then they said we could go home. So the 2 detectives put us in the car, my sister and I, and so we go to Irving. And when we get to the hospital there where my car was parked, um, I got out of the police car and I was standing beside my car and I opened the door and I noticed that the back seat of my car had been taken out and not put back correctly. And I turned to one of the detectives and I said, "What happened here?" And they said, "Oh, by the way," they said, we searched your car before we came in to get you. And they didn't offer to put the seat back in, so I did that. They drove off. I put the seat in. My sister got in the passenger side of my car, and we went home there at Irving. And,
wow. By the way, sir, let me ask you a question, please. The questions they asked you during the polygraph exam, do you remember what those questions were?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay. So then you're there with, I guess, Lenny Mae. Randall is there, your sister in the car with you, right? You're driving home. So what was that ride like?
We were very, very quiet. We didn't talk. We just couldn't believe what had gone on. So we get home, and I parked my car beside the carport like I always did. And we get in and go into the house. We were totally exhausted. And by the way, all of those hours that I was being questioned, I asked for some water. Well, when you go into sometimes businesses, they'll have like these styrofoam cups for coffee.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, you have like 3 different sizes that they have. Well, the smallest one, I only got about half a cup of water that whole time. I was so thirsty. And
wow.
I think about that sometimes, how I had to talk for hours and hours and hours.
Wow.
And but when they was interrogating me and questioning me, I never was offered an attorney or anything. They just did their police work, and I got through that, and we got to go home, and it was Saturday morning, early hours of Saturday morning time we got home. Well, so my sister brother-in-law's home was on a corner lot, and so my bed was the sofa in the living room. That's where I slept every day. Well,
yeah,
I was so scared that if a car would, I didn't sleep well, and if a car would turn the corner and the lights would shine into the living room, I was off the sofa on the floor. And I did this for more nights than I can tell you.
Are you afraid that somebody was going to ambush you or take you away, or what?
Well, I didn't know what to think, but I know one thing, and I realized that how serious this thing was. And you just never know. Being a young kid from a real rural area, I was totally very scared.
Wow,
and I was
for decades.
I was for decades. I was very scared.